How y'all doing? I'm Joshua Wiley, and this is a quick video. If I have to make more parts to this, I will, but this is about women's ordination and an untold story in the Bible that's rarely told that deals with the subject of women ordination. And is it right or is it wrong? Is it right or is it wrong? Now, I've been fairly silent on the issue because I don't feel like there's too much I have to say, because the Bible is clear. The Bible is clear. I'm not for it at all. I'm not even for the commissioning of women as pastors like they like to do in the church nowadays. It's like, okay, the General Conference said we won't ordain women, so it's like they found out a little loophole or back way to still do it and get away with it. And with me, any of you, if you're watching this right now, you know I love the sanctuary and the study of the sanctuary. And just the study of the sanctuary alone, you'll find out that there has never been a woman high priest in God's sanctuary, officiating in God's sanctuary. So when you ordain a woman or you commission a woman, then you are putting her as high priest of the sanctuary. I mean, I don't know about you, but knowing that God is a God of order and he said, I change not, that is so deep. It's so deep. And now I really wouldn't want to be the one to do it. And this story that I'm going to share about Gideon actually sums it up in a whole loophole. Now, first I'm gonna deal with what a lot of my brothers who are pastors, who I've spoken to, my kinsfolk who are for it, so many people who are for it that I've spoken to, they often say, well, if somebody is blessed by God and gifted to teach and things of that nature, they should not be denied, Josh. And I always say, yeah, that's true. I agree with you. You know, I never said a woman couldn't teach, couldn't preach, couldn't do anything a man can't do in the church. But if you need a title to do it, if a woman is making a big issue, and I say this for any woman or any man, if anybody is making an issue about a title, then do they really deserve that title in the first place? You should be in the church and be willing to fulfill any role despite a title. You know, the title doesn't make the person makes the title. But anyway, so, and most of us, I grew up in a single parent home. I was taught life from a woman. So of course I'm not against women teaching. That is not my role. But when you go to officiating in God's sanctuary, then that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. And like I said, the story of Gideon right here is one of the most untold. I grew up my whole life and I was never shown this about Gideon, and it blew me away. And I'll go ahead and summarize it before I read. Now, if you want to read it in the Bible, and the Bible is found in Judges chapter 8 verses 22 through 28, and it speaks about how Gideon, they wanted Gideon to be king, but he wouldn't do it. Now, that was good, but what Gideon ended up doing is making an idol of gold for the people to worship. He ended up making an idol of gold for people to worship. I got my little ones. But he ends up making an idol of gold for the people to worship. And I thought it just ended right there. You know, I thought it just ended right there. But the story was actually way deeper than we realized. What actually happened was Gideon made himself a high priest in God's sanctuary. And this is what led Israel into apostasy. Now let's go back over. Now, how you say, Josh, how does this go with women's ordination? Here Gideon was a chosen vessel of God. Now, because that's what I hear a lot from a lot of my friends who are pastors and ministers and things of that nature. They say, well, if this woman is chosen of God, then I don't believe we can hinder her. Because here Gideon was a chosen vessel. He was a chosen vessel, did mighty works for God. But when it came to God's sanctuary, Gideon was not supposed to be high priest. He was not supposed to be high priest at all. And so he ends up bringing a curse upon Israel. All we Adventists who think it's okay to commission women and things of this nature? Are we bringing a curse upon God's house? Could it be one of the reasons why in Laodicea, when dealing with Laodicea, Jesus says, I will spew you out of my mouth? Now just think about it. Just think about it. Here Gideon was a man. Now, if it's okay for just anybody to officiate in God's house, here Gideon was a man. Chosen vessel of God, did things when no other man was stood up. So a special chosen vessel of God, and still brought curse and damnation upon himself and adultery into his house when he said, well, I can be priest. Does that clearly show? I don't know about you, but if Gideon can't be a high priest in God's sanctuary because of the way God has it set up, then who are we to just pick and choose and say, oh, because this woman is chosen, she can be a high priest in God's sanctuary? Let's see. If many of you who aren't familiar with this book, it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's called Patriarchs and Prophets. And Ellen White spoke on this situation with Gideon in a little more detail. She actually writes, when Gideon, I'm going to start when he would not be king, when he told him, nah, I'm not going to be king. God is your king. And that was awesome. Gideon, he was right there. But then he stepped into another era. He said, I'm trying to find some light, y'all, because I know I'm dark. Okay, that's a good amount of light. The sun is setting, so it won't last long. But anyway, page 361 says, but Gideon was betrayed into another era, which brought disaster upon his house and upon all Israel. The season of inactivity that succeeds a great struggle is often fraught with greater danger than in the period of conflict. To this danger Gideon was now exposed. A spirit of unrest was upon him. Hitherto he had been content to fulfill the directions given him from God, but now, instead of waiting for divine guidance, he began to plan for himself. When the armies of the Lord have gained a signal victory, Satan will redouble his efforts. To overthrow the work of God. Thus, thoughts and plans were suggested to the mind of Gideon by which the people of Israel were led astray. Because he had been commanded, let's find the light. Because he had been commanded to offer sacrifice upon the rock where the angel appeared to him, Gideon concluded that he had been appointed to officiate as priest. Wow. Without waiting for the divine sanction, he determined to provide a suitable place and to institute a system of worship similar to that carried on the tabernacle. I done lost my place. Similar to that carried on at the tabernacle. With a strong popular feeling in his favor, he found no difficulty in carrying out his plan. At his request, all the earrings of gold and so on and so on. His course, check this out, y'all. His course proved a snare to himself and his family as well as to Israel. The unauthorized worship led many of the people finally to forsake the Lord altogether, to serve idols. After Gideon's death, great numbers, among whom were his own family, joined in this apostasy. The people were led away from God by the very man who had once overthrown their idolatry. So even though when people say, oh, this woman, she's a great spiritual leader and she's blessed to teach, I mean, that's true and that's cool. That may be so. You know, I never said, and a lot of my brothers, often like Doug Batchelor, Stephen Bohr, we never said that anybody could not teach. But when it comes to officiating in the house of God, you know, Satan knows the rules. So he has so many blinded to this fact. So now look at it compared to Gideon. Gideon was a chosen vessel of God, chosen and a man. But he led Israel astray, brought a snare upon his household when he felt that he could officiate as priest, because God allowed him to do the sacrifice with the angel upon the rock earlier in his life. So this story, the minute I read it for myself, you know, the devil does not want you to know this story or to realize, because just think about it. How many times have we heard the story of Gideon and what Gideon did in life, which was powerful, you know, allowing God to use him, you know, being a powerful vessel of the Lord? How many times have we heard that? But I'd grown up in the church, I never really heard about Gideon falling and going into apostasy and bringing a curse upon his house and upon Israel themselves. Are we bringing a curse upon God's house and the whole church? If the General Conference said we shouldn't do it, is it okay to just go ahead and, oh, we found a loophole, we can commission women pastors? No. That's spirit of rebellion. That's like me telling my kids you can't have the cookies in the cookie jar, but they find a loophole to get the cookies in the cookie jar. After I told them they can't have the cookies in the cookie jar, you know, but they still get the cookies in the cookie jar. They say, well, Dad, you didn't word it. You didn't say, not to take them out. So they drill a hole in the bottom of the jar so the cookies just fall out anyway. You know what I'm saying? No, that's what we're doing. And it's sad. It breaks my heart, y'all. Like, truly, it breaks my heart when I see this. This is my church. But these things are going to happen. Remember, the devil is going to be where the truth is at. Does that mean we leave the body and leave the church? God forbid. No. If I was the enemy, I'm going to attack where the truth is at. So does God church expect perfection? By far. Look at the founders of our church. They had issues and quirks and things of that nature. The devil is going to attack where the truth is at. But beloved, concerning this issue of women ordination, like I've told many, and I haven't gotten not one response back from the opposite. I said, show me one example of a woman high priest in God's sanctuary in the Bible, and I'll be all for it. They can't show me not one. Now, are there women prophetesses? Yes, there is. Deborah, Philip's daughters, you know. And then we have a woman with a mighty ministry, Dorcas. She was so mighty in her ministry in the neighborhood, God had to bring her back alive so she could keep working, you know. She wasn't worried about did Peter make her an elder in the church? No. He just brought her back to life. But she was a mighty worker for God, a chosen vessel. So nobody is saying, oh, if a woman can't be a minister, or if she can't be ordained or commissioned, then you're holding her back from doing God's work. No, she should do the work anyway. I had an elder tell me, and this was a man tell me one time, he said, we needed some people to be deacons in the church, and I was a deacon. Now he talking to me, I was a deacon, right? And he said, nah, Josh, if they won't let me be an elder, I'm not being no deacon. I pulled him aside, you know, and I said, well, brother, is that the right spirit to have? If you're not humble enough to play any role that you may be needed in the church, then are you really ready for the position that you're asking for? In layman's terms, in my head, y'all. Now I tried to word it as best as I worded it to him, but in my head I really said, if you're not willing to just serve, if you're worried about a title, then you don't deserve the position anyway. I know a lot of women, like my mother, for instance, who serve and minister and do work, and they can care less about a title. They can care less about being called pastor or elder. That's the spirit you need to have. That's the spirit we need in the church. And that's the spirit that God is looking for. But beloved, are these women commissioned pastors and ordained pastors that we have in our North American conference and just sprouting up in little other conferences, are they bringing the curse of Gideon to God's house? Why doesn't the devil want you to know this about the story of Gideon and God's house? I love the sermon Stephen Bohr does and Doug Batchelor do on women's ordination, and the way Stephen Bohr broke it down about Korah's rebellion. But here we have what's different from Korah and Gideon. Gideon was a chosen vessel of God. At a time when God needed someone, God chose Gideon. Gideon was special, and Gideon still was not permitted to become priest. I don't know about you, but to me, that says a lot. Y'all have a blessed one. Y'all have a good one. Later.